Greetings, this is the Questing GM, so I hope this is streaming and well, there's still a few more adjustments to be made in terms of my stream speech. But anyways, this is another Quickstarter video just to capture my own first impressions, thoughts, and experience with running a new game. And my Quickstarter project is pretty much coming to an end. You know, as the year is also coming to an end. I'm not sure if I'll be continuing to do these Quickstarter videos for 2020, but we'll get to that when I conclude the series with a few more games in mind. And actually, this was going to be my second last game for the series, but turns out that maybe I might be able to fit in a couple more before by the time December rolls in. So that will altogether put me in about, I believe, about 7 games. I've tried new 7 quick start games throughout 2019, and I would say that's a pretty it's a very satisfying result. I would say it's a very satisfying experiment to do to spend an entire year not running a game that I'm very used to and have been practically growing up with, and to really explore the really horizons that are available out there in the RPG world, and obviously trying to hit a few classics and or maybe some games that I've been wanting to try for all this while. So what is game number 5? Game number 5 is basically Modern AGE. Modern AGE, as we all know, it's by Green Ronin Publishing, and it's one of their AGE line or adventure game engine system, and I think the reason why I picked this partly because I wanted to try the AGE system, which has been out since the first Dragon Age. But I didn't want to go on a fantasy route and go ahead with Fantasy Age because I didn't want to play another game that would remind me of Dungeons and Dragons. And I have not actually picked an actual game or system that has been set in the modern setting. So I guess Modern AGE, just pretty much fits in the bill for both criteria of why I wanted to play, why I wanted Modern AGE to be my next quick start. So we are basically going to run through this together. I just finished running the quick start adventure with my group yesterday at the time of this recording, and yeah, there are definitely some things to talk about, and there are definitely some things to point out, and maybe make some recommendations or make some suggestions, or generally just to condense my thoughts and what I really thought about the Modern AGE as a quick start, and maybe the adventure itself, and maybe the entire expectations or experience that I had with this quick start, and hopefully that will be helpful for someone who's watching this video right now. So Modern AGE is I believe it would be about, it runs into about 33 pages, 34. Yeah, it runs about 34 pages, but that's not including the pre-gens and the back covers and all that comes with the adventure. So 34 pages is actually I would say it's a relatively more on the average size of quick starts that have been exposed to. There are definitely ones that are longer, and there are definitely ones that are shorter. But if your quick start is within the 30 but less than 40 range, I think that's pretty much standard sizes of quick start. So nothing really outstanding there, just to point out. And so we'll get into the quick start itself. So this is actually the Threefold Quickstart. I believe this came out for free RPG Day for 2019, and it's actually a updated version of the original Modern AGE Quickstart that came out, I believe, maybe at least a couple years ago or maybe last year. And even though I have the original quick start that came in it, but I decided to go with this one because this is supposedly the more updated version and revised version. and also because I believe they may have actually, this is actually the this was actually created after Green Ronin actually decided to go with a new official modern age setting, which is the threefold of the Metacosm, and therefore that plays a prominent part inside this adventure itself. This Quickstar in itself, which is adventure is based on. But I believe that adventure was basically the basis also for the older Quickstart. So I won't be able to tell you the difference between the both Quickstarts other than what Quickstart here claims itself to be, that it's an updated version. But generally, I don't think that in terms of the rules and mechanics, I don't think there's anything that's been really drastically changed from the original Quickstart. So this is actually my first exposure to the Age system. I have read the Dragon Age Quickstart way back when it was released, but never really got to try it. But based on my readings of what was available in the Dragon Age and what is available here, the core engine is still pretty much the same, which is the 3d6. One of it is a stun die, and if you roll doubles of any of 3 dice, then you will get stun points to perform stunts. And I guess that's pretty much the core design for the Age system, which is the stun system. Although obviously the system has probably been refined or revised, with several iterations since Dragon Age, and I think Modern Age is probably one of the more later ones, which I believe maybe the latest would be the Expanse. But yeah, I mean, Modern Age is still I believe it's still a very well supported line by Green Ronin as of 2019. So it was an interesting time to get into this quick start, because seeing that the momentum for Modern Age is still very strong, and it would definitely be a good time to get into Modern Age if the quick start was a convincing enough buy. So general layout is basically just as always your 2-column layout. Fonts are actually pretty more unique than you expect from other quick starts. They have a more stylized font. And let's see if we can look at the credits of the people who made this quick start. So here we have design and writing by Alejandro Melchor. I believe that's how the name is produced. Development by Malcolm Shepard. Editing by Matt Click, who sounds like a familiar name. I think he's one of the current YouTubers that are currently on RPGs. And we have interior and cover art by Stalisa Dlenko, Claudia Inacielo, Elisa McCarthy, Victor Leza Moreno, Michael Pagesny, and Andrei Valischenko, I believe. Yeah. And obviously the Age system designed by Chris Pramus. All right. So starting off on the first few pages, it tells you they have your basic what's included in the quick start, what you need to play in the quick start, and what's a role-playing game. But these are definitely the things that I would say is pretty important for introductory product like a quick start. And even though they have the introduction of what an RPG is, which they basically tell you to go and read the wiki page, but generally, I'm not very sure if there's a very good introduction for people to read what RPGs is. But if that's how Green Ronin wants to approach it and supplement the reading of what an RPG is, that's their definition of what an RPG is. Then the next on we go into the Modern Age character sheet. So this I would say is like pretty much standard content of Quick Start, which instead of describing the charge and rules, you go with the explanation of the Modern Age character sheet, which in its own way, yes, it can help with the learning process and trying to understand, or at least makes it easier to break down the character sheet to the more important parts. So that's helpful in its own way, and I think it's not really surprising for many quick starts to adopt this. Altogether, there are 5 pre-gens, and I think I'll talk a little bit more about the pre-gens later on when I get into the adventure section. But suffice to say that after explaining the character sheets, then they present with what are the options of the pre-gens, and then then they go into some basic rules like armor, weapons, and weapon groups. And then they had this table right here that gives a list of all the weapons that are available in the pre-gens. Although my small complaint here is that this equipment list doesn't come with the cost of buying them. So I'm guessing that the Quickstart Adventure is assuming the players will not be able to have access to this equipment. But I think it would have been, just an additional column would have been useful, because I did run into a situation where the players did ask that if they wanted to buy any of these equipments on this list, where would they have what would they have to go through. Alright, then moving on, we just come into the basic core mechanics. So as I've already explained, it's basically 3d6. We have to uses a more bell curve distribution of dice, and there are basically only 3 types of tests in the age system, which is a simple test, opposed test, and advanced test. An advanced test being a simple test that has a threshold, and the point threshold, and the threshold is gathered by a successful simple test with the number on the stun die contributing towards the threshold. It's something that it's not difficult to understand, but it was quite difficult for me to bring into play, despite the Quickstart Adventure itself having a encounter / scenario that actually utilizes this. But I think I'll get into that a little bit later on. Then we come into the combat section on page 6. Basic rules of initiative actions, which divides into major and minor actions, and also what happens when you're using a range attack that has reloading properties. If you're using a ranged weapon that has reloading properties, depending on the rate of fire of the depending on the rate of fire of the weapon and so forth. Then you have the rules for inflicting damage. You have the rules for stuns, and also the additional add-on of relationship stuns, which I believe does not exist in the Dragon Age version. So this is definitely one upgrade of the age system since Dragon Age. Then later on we go into some basic rules about health and healing, which doesn't take too much. And then the one other aspect of the rules that was quite appreciative, and maybe I haven't really noticed in the Dragon Age system, is the other encounter section, which has a few minor suggestions. I wouldn't even or guidelines on how to run exploration encounters and social encounters. There are no real hard and fast rules in terms of how exploration and social encounters are done, but I do appreciate that the system does divide itself into running combat encounters, exploration encounters, and social encounters more explicitly, or at least the way it's organized to imply that it was a very more explicit part of the rules, rather than how D&D does it, which claims itself to have 3 pillars. But the exploration and the social rules are actually much more scattered than compared to the combat rules, which is a little bit of a shame, and also can be a bit misleading in some instances if you're not really paying attention to where the rules are actually stated. And again, here we have the exploration and social stunts, which applies to those exploration and social situations. Although this is probably another area where I feel there's a little bit of a missed opportunity, which I'll get to later, shortly after. Then we have the power stunts, which are the ones that, because Modern Age is still, despite its modern setting, it still allows for magic, and so there's powers related, and I believe power is just probably a reskin name for the spells that was used in Dragon Age setting. And that's pretty much it. That's actually just the core mechanics and rules, all packed together within 10 pages. The first 10 pages out of 37 pages is all covered is all covered by the rules, and the rules only just take up that one small portion of it, or like just barely a third. And then we come into the next section, which I would say is a minor introduction to the setting itself, which is the metacosm of Threefold. It's just a one-page primer about its entire setting, and I wasn't very sure what sort of information this actually belongs to. Like, is this actually a player information, or is this a GM information? Because it doesn't really, being its own page, it doesn't really fit or folds itself into the adventure, which actually starts on the next page, in page 12. So while this is a very quick and short and dirty primer for the setting itself. How this ties into the adventure is actually where my problems with the quick start to come in, and I can fully understand that it's probably the toughest aspect of making a quick start product, especially given the amount of page count that's dedicated to it. But I would say a quick start product that has a poor adventure makes and breaks the quick start, and I think that's really the Achilles heel for me, for this quick start. And so the adventure name is called Burning Brighter, which is itself a update version of the original Modern Age adventure called Burning Bright. The general gist of it is that there is some sort of magical plague that has spread all the way to Earth, and it is up to the PCs to try to discover the source of the plague and try to cure it. And along the way, they will at the end of the adventure, they will find out that the plague has actually been intentionally created by factions within the setting that's supposed to protect Earth, because of certain political reasons. And in general, that I would say is a very interesting premise for a quick start adventure, because it sort of blends in the element of a mystery, as well as requiring the players to like plan a hop into different planes and really immerse themselves into the adventure. The real problem that I have with the adventure is that it's actually written in a way that it's a linear adventure which is given. I mean, that's something to be expected from quick starts, because there's not enough page count that can really accept a more sandboxy approach. So it's understandably linear, but it's also too linear to the extent that it doesn't seem to really entertain any sort of variances. And in the way the adventure is written, as the opportunities for variances is just so blatant and so easily done. And there are even moments in the writing that actually insist on the players to be railroaded, or insist certain events are unavoidable, even though there are many reasons why they can be or may not turn out that way. So while the adventure starts on the first page, which has a very good background and summary, which basically summarizes what the adventure is about and what's supposed to happen, and then you come into another page, the page after that has a glossary of the metacosm of all the terms. Now, I don't know. This is actually one other problem that I have with this quick start adventure. If you see, it basically takes up nearly half a page. That's a huge amount of terms for both a new GM and a new player to take in, and it not being tied to the primer page before that really makes it really difficult to try to understand and wrap your head around, for one thing, and then to memorize it as a GM, and then lastly to explain it to the players. This adventure requires a lot of front loading to the players to really explain everything, the intricacies, and I'm guessing this is just scratching the surface, but even on the surface, it's so intricate of the factions, of the factions there are, the terms that they use when they're referring to different planes, and the different specific terms, like in essence, the initiateds, the different worlds, and then you have to know who the Peridixion, the relationship of the Peridixion and the Atheon, and who are the Sodality, and even just to understand like the relationships between Sodality and Vitane. That's two different terms that you have to define, and try to make your head around. And another problem that I have with this glossary is that as a GM, this doesn't really provide you with much ammunition or much material to expand on the adventure if needed. These are all explanation of the terms that it's probably meant for the players, but when the tie-in of this with the adventure and the pre-gens, it becomes very loose, or it becomes very, what's the word, superfluous in a way that the players don't understand what is the significance of them being a member of the Atheon. The players don't really understand what's the significance of them being a member of the Paradix of the Sodality, and how, and if the player picks a pre-gen from either of those two organizations, they don't know, they are not even really given any much material to know how to role play members of those organizations. Not at least not from this very simple glossary that is given. So to me, this feels a little bit redundant because of what I think the primer page explains it, or at least connects the dots a little bit better than here. So I wasn't sure if this was going to be helpful to give to the players, because especially as a quick start, you don't want to front load too much reading with exposition or too much forcing the players to get into the world by just giving them a list, rather than trying to immerse the players with some more clever organization of writing, I believe. All right. Now, and so we start the adventure, and the adventure tells the players that they should be able to do some shopping before they get in, but they're only limited to a very specific list of equipments that is listed right here, and they'll be buying things like a camera, cell phones, flare guns, all that sort of thing. Now, this is another recurring problem that I have with quick starts. They have lists of equipment, and I think this was the problem that happened with me with Alternity. If you're gonna give me a list of equipment, give me at least an idea of a mechanical usage of that equipment. I know some of these things are pretty obvious, but I want to see in a quick start that has equipment to tell me what are these equipment supposed to do within the context of the quick start, and if they're even relevant at all. Because especially in the later part of the adventure, when the players have to start planet hopping, and then they have to get into contact with in essence, so there is a high possibility that some of the equipment that here is going to be unusable. So I don't understand what's the real intention of having players buy equipment that they will not be able to use later on, and that just creates frustration for no good reason. And the worst thing, and coming back to that list about weapons and armor, these are the equipment that the players may not be interested in buying. They don't see what's the point of buying a bicycle. What's the bicycle going to do with a quick adventure? Why not give them the stats for the target number for a gun? Especially for some of the pre-gens that doesn't have any ranged weapons or any of the even the melee weapons to go with. So this is interesting to have. It's nice to have, but it just doesn't serve any purpose in the context of the quick start. And I'm just not really sure how was this supposed to be helpful in any way. All right. Now, basically, the adventure starts in a clinic where the players are there for various reasons that are stated in the pre-gen, and then the police barges in carrying a person who is an otherworlder, basically someone who comes from another plane, and then the clinic is ambushed by a bunch of extraplanar hitmen, and they have come to claim that otherworlder, but the encounter is written in such a way that the otherworlder is supposed to escape, and the players are supposed to pursue that otherworlder after receiving a mission from their respective organizations, and that's the key part of this otherworlder to play, to lead them into to really kick off the adventure. But then you have and given the situation of of how this other world is supposed to play, and how the hit on the clinic is supposed to play out, you have words, you have writings like this. Turin exists to introduce the adventure and act as a target for characters later, so he shouldn't have been significantly injured or killed, and is given game statistics as a non-combatant. In the default setup of the adventure, he must, with an actual emphasis, he must be able to get away. This is just poor planning and poor writing. This is not something that you should see in an RPG that, given the nature of RPG that explains itself, that says, it's a collaboration storytelling. And this shows, this to me at least, I don't really care about anyone else's points of view of this, but to me, this shows that this is just, railroading 101. And this is actually a very disappointing thing to see on a product of Green Ronin caliber, to see this sort of approach being taken on how they design their adventures. And truth be told, when I ran the adventure, even though my players didn't really pick up on me trying to force this NPC to leave, and even the explanation of how he leaves by turning on a magical ring, which he should not be able to activate because he has the plague with him. There's a lot of logical inconsistencies within the adventure itself, or at least there's not addressed in the adventure itself, that really makes it difficult to enforce a thing that says he must be able to get away. So it's really not helping the GM to run this without fearing for players to easily just break the logic of this game. So the logical consistency and the plot consistency of this entire adventure has been really flimsy from start to finish. And the worst part is, this is actually one of the more longer adventures that I've seen in the Quickstart, because it breaks up into 3 parts, and there are, I would say, a good 3 to 4 encounters for each part. So the adventure is supposed to be sustainably long for I would say fits in within an entire 4 to 6 hour session. Given different rates of experience of the players, and it's not making it easier to sustain the entire adventure when you have some poorly planned writing in the entire adventure. So once the NPC has escaped, once the players have dealt with the hitmen that come to attack, this extra planar hitmen that have come to attack, they are recruited by representatives of the 2 organizations, the Paradixion and the Sodality, at a club, and they explain what is at stake, which is the plague that's been going on and has spread its wings also into Earth. And the mission for the PCs at this point is for them to find that other world that has managed to escape, which leads them to a bunch of warehouses. And when they reach the warehouse, they will be attacked by a griffin cub. Nothing, some fanciful combat there, and that's one experience I had when I was running the adventure. Is that with the stats of the monsters that's given, and the amount of damage they deal, and also given the stats of the pre-gen, which has a relatively, I would feel, is a relatively low defense and armor toughness rating. Combat in the adventure is actually pretty deadly. One of my PCs actually went down about 3 times while he was during the first adventure in itself. Granted, I only had 3 players out of the intended 5, and that was something I may have overlooked. But I wasn't expecting, just for one PC, when one PC was going against one hitman. The hitman actually dealt significantly a lot of damage and was actually on the verge of one shot kill any of the pre-gens that was available to them. So maybe there was an intention of the module itself, or maybe the intention of the entire system in itself, but I was definitely not expecting Modern Age, or at least this adventure, to be this deadly throughout most of the adventure. So once the PCs reach the warehouse, they would meet with a bunch of refugees that came from the same plane as the other worlder, and then they would speak. According to the adventure, they would have to speak to the caretaker of the refugees by the name of Jenica Reach, and she is considered an optimate, which in this world, in modern age terms, means that she's a descendant of one of the mythical icons or gods. In this case, I believe it's Odysseus. Yes, I think it's Odysseus. Yeah, and she would lead them. She would point them to the directions of where they would find the source of the plague, which belongs into the home plane of the other worlder. Now, as written and as a GM, as you read about Jenica Reach's powers, she actually has the power to jump between planes without needing a gate. The normal means for other people to travel between the planes is actually through a gate. Now, this is another break in the logic. If the PCs, if the exposition that is given to the PCs to tell them that you need to find the source of the plague in Tenebrim, which is the name of the plane where the plague came from. But the way it's written, the PCs are supposed to go to the home plane of the Sodality or the Vitane. But if the PCs are told that where the source of the plague is, and that is their mission to find, why would they want to go? Why would they not ask Jenica Reach to take them to Tenebrim straight away instead of going through Vitane, as how the adventure is structured? And that's something I can understand why Jenica's Reach is put in this particular area. She's just the next stepping stone to get to the next part of the adventure, but that doesn't really fly very well to players, especially especially depending on how you organize or how the information flows to them. So that was definitely another area that I had to make changes. I basically had to make a lot of serious changes to the adventure, to the point that I wasn't really feeling confident of running the adventure at all, and there was a lot of trepidations when I started to run the adventure after making my changes, because I had to really switch a few NPCs around. Jenica Reach actually I had to throw Jenica Reach way further back into the adventure and replace her with whoever they were supposed to meet in Tenebrim. So basically, because of that, part 2 basically becomes a redundancy to my running of the quick start, because I can't, if my thesis I just asked why I couldn't explain that Jenica Reach can take them to Tenebrim, then obviously that would not flow with how the adventure is going to flow next. So I pretty much scrammed or took apart whatever was supposed to happen in part 2 of the adventure, where they actually had to go into the plane of Vigriff, which is the capital of the Vitanes, and put it into Tenebrim, assuming they actually went to Tenebrim. And so pretty much all the information in chapter 2, in part 2, pretty much got thrown out the window for me, except for bits and pieces. And that's also another area of part of the adventure where part 2 just doesn't really do it for me, because as written, when the PCs enter the Vitane, they are supposed to do a research on of a previous mission that was sent to Tenebrim, and find out what actually went on with that. But the thing is, there was nothing that alluded to this from the beginning of the adventure, and it was really, and Jenica never really mentions about the adventure, but she does not explain that where are the leads to find more information about the adventure. The adventure was written in a way that it was assumed that the players would know about this, but how would they be able to assume this? Number one, if they are new to the setting, and number two, they are never really told what resources are available to an Atheon or to a Sodality member. And even as a GM, when you were reading it, you only managed to connect the dots later on. So that put the prerogative on the GM to be telling the players that, hey, now that you're in Vigriff, did you know that you could do this? Which I feel doesn't flow naturally for an adventure that's supposed to be introducing the setting itself. So there's this dangerous disconnect for me when I was running the quick start, and when I was even prepping for it before I decided to make changes to it, because the setting itself is introduced, but not introduced in a proper way or in a very organized way. Things felt that I had to I didn't appreciate having to fill in the gaps where I found that. Now, the other thing that also really annoyed me, and this was something I think they should have addressed in the rules section, not something that I found out, is that what happens when players go into different worlds using Earth technology. They have a few sidebars here. While I appreciate the sidebars because the sidebars do clear up any, I mean, the sidebars do give a real quick gist of what the rules is about and what's supposed to happen. But it's also very strange to put this rule in the adventure itself rather than in the core setting of the rules, because in the adventure itself, when you are carrying Earth technology to go to different worlds, and depending on the type of the world that you're going to, they may not work due to a thing called incessance. Yeah, they may not work due to a thing called incessance. And when the PCs actually use any Earth technology in a world that has incessance, they actually have to make a check, which is not well explained. They have to make a check, and if they fail the check, then the item is basically does not work, or has a yeah, crossing the gate in essence. All right. Items which fail due to innocence often do so in strange or irritating left to the game master to invent. You see this, and they explain that the full rules on incessance is actually in the full core rules in itself. But again, the players just got their equipment that they bought off in the beginning, and then they go into Vigriff, and then they are immediately told that, oh, you've brought equipment to Vigriff, and therefore they may run into not working at all. That's just creating even more frustrations for players. Like, why did I bother buying all the equipment in the start, only for it to run into the risk of not working in the different worlds? And in the none of the NPCs they have met so far are telling them that has are written in such a way to address that, hey, maybe you want to be aware about incessance. And if I did not read about this particular site by itself, I wouldn't have figured that the NPCs are supposed to be telling the PCs that, hey, maybe your equipment is in danger of not working properly when you go to different worlds. So that's, these are just minor annoyances but given the amount that there is in the quick start, it just builds up and it makes the entire experience just very unfriendly for me to run. Okay. And then comes to another part of the adventure. What they're supposed to find out in section 2 is basically how do they make their way to Tenebrim. And the key point here is that they're supposed to do it through a concept called gate chains. So basically, PCs cannot just go from plane A to plane B, or the destination of their planes, but they have to go through a series of chains, a series of gates, each on different worlds to reach the final destination. And before that, they were supposed to reach to a plane called Karalvos, but in the book they tell you that you're supposed to sort of generate some random planes for the PCs to go through. Now let me just read you the section that particular section of how the GM is supposed to handle this this series of gate chains. To generate the sodality on Nakit's chain, roll 1d3 plus 2 to determine the number of planes between Vigriff and Kovalos. Then roll 2d6 that many times on the planes in the gate chain table to discover the planes and environments the environments characters visit. The GM can always choose results instead of rolling, and can improvise encounters along the way or briefly describe a less eventful leg of the journey. This is completely redundant. And just using the table that was given on the different planes, get a 2, Vidaran, healthy marshes inhabited by people adapted to amphibious life. Travel is via canoes rented from the locals. They sometimes forget visitors can't breathe water. Or let's take all these 7 and 8, Ollie Duster, grass-covered hills with no tall vegetation and many cracks on the ground. There are soft tremors throughout the day and at least 2 big earthquakes during the journey. This is just completely redundant because there's not enough material for the GM to roll on to make any of these part of the adventures eventful, and there is no stats of this of whatever creatures they encounter as the PCs are traveling through. So basically this is all just an improvised and overextended description. This is, I get that this is supposed to show that the PCs are traveling through different places and the vastness of the setting, but it doesn't help much with the immersion. It adds more work as a GM to improvise, and there is no real plot significance going whether the PCs went through one plane or they went through 5 planes or they went through 6 planes. It's not, it has its purpose, but it's the execution of how it's done is really poor and really not well thought of. And it's always very bad when you at least in my book, it's always a very unsatisfying piece of work to that actually gives more work to the GM, because I'm not here to flex creative muscles yet, because I'm here to learn your system and I want the system to work with me and make my life easier as a GM with the system, not to show that there's a disconnect or disassociation between system and setting. So yeah, that's just so as you might imagine, I skipped this entire section of this entire concept of a gate chain, because again, with Jenika's power of creating different portals by herself, there was no need for a gate chain. I had to use the gate chain concept as a deterrent for the PCs to say, hey, maybe you should get on the good side of Jenika, so that she'll help you to get straight to Tenebrim rather than going through this dangerous line of gate chains. So I think let's just move on to the last section of the adventure, when the PCs actually do reach Tenebrim and they actually find out that the refugees that they were seeking for has camped itself out to a lake. And while they do find their quarry or the source of the plague, which happens to be a Paradixion member who's injected himself, and I had to restructure the logic of why he injected himself with the plague to become patient 0, because as written, it actually makes even less sense of why he actually did it based on the logic of the adventure. So that being the anchor of the adventure of who they're actually looking for, made a lot more work for me to even just conceive the adventure, to start making the changes. And at the end of the adventure, it's written when they are about to when they have met with their target, the camp gets under attack, and that's where the big reveal is supposed to happen, that the member of the Paradixion who they met earlier on in the adventure, who gave them the mission, was the one who was actually conspiring to create the plague and actually use the plague to sort of to his own agenda, for various effects in Earth's protecting Earth and also using the other planes. So the big review, to be frank, also doesn't really make a lot of real sense, and there was no means for the players to get a hint or receive any satisfying foreshadowing that this was what the villain, who turns out to be the Paradixion member, had in mind all about. And there was an involvement with a clone that had to be mentally broken to reveal the secrets of what the main villain was actually planning. Okay, so But fortunately, to wrap things up, there was actually a very good cheat sheet that came at the very end of the adventure. So they comes up with all the basic explanation of the rules, some of the summaries of the combat actions that were available, and the stunts. Although, this is where I wanted to come in and say that they didn't include the social and exploration stunts that was available in the previous section of the rules. So it actually made our group having to do a little bit of back and forth to find the exploration and social stunt rule when we were looking for it most of the time on this cheat sheet. So this is a good cheat sheet, but it's far from a perfect cheat sheet as well. And then now we come to my last complaint, and it's probably the last straw of my impressions about the quick start. Is the pre-generated character sheets. Now, for the love of God, if you're making a pre-generated sheet, and especially that comes with special abilities that give them additional stats, please include them into the calculations of whatever their attacks are, because after a few combats in, especially when we started finding out that the players were not doing enough damage to the enemies as much as we thought they were supposed to be doing, only for us to find out that the damage calculations were not including any of the talents, and even, God forbid, some of the base, like even the melee attacks, which is supposed to add the strength of the character, was not included into the calculation of the damage. So this is just, and obviously the other complaint is that there were some adventurers that had I'll just take this one. I didn't keep the other pregens that my players played. I let them keep their pregens, but the ones that was not have, there were situations where the players didn't have weapons at all. So this actually even made the lethality of the combat even more deadlier, because these pregens were effectively useless in combat. Not the ones that I have, but especially one of them who was just a social creature, and it just made combat even more miserable. So, for all intents and purposes, this quick start for me feels like it's trying to do what it's trying to do what it's supposed to do, but it has just so many flaws and so many frustrations that comes in the conception of the product itself, which is a really, really big shame, because modern age and setting that comes in this quick start is something that's so unique to the age line, at least, not to other modern setting systems, but at least to the age line, that there's really something to sell, but the pitch is so poorly done in this quick start that it was actually much more frustrating. And given the quality of the adventure and the plot and the thoughtfulness that when they came into it, even my players didn't feel it was very compelling. Even after the changes that I had to make sure that it didn't fall off the rails as quickly as it started. So I really, really urge any publishers or designers, when you make your quick start, please make it, number one, just make it as simple as you can to demonstrate and to highlight or to showcase your mechanics. I think that's just one of the core principles of a good quick start adventure. Don't front load with too much exposition, or don't front load with too much expectation or assumptions on what the players are going to know, especially when there's everything there is to know about your setting, it comes in just a couple of pages, or only has a couple of pages to explain itself. Don't try to force feed or railroad the adventure into a certain direction when you're not giving the GM at least good handles on to really have good reasons to make the PCs go on the tracks. And lastly, just have a solid pre-generated character. Just make sure you do a thorough look through, a quality assurance check on what's available on the paper. Make sure the numbers check out, make sure everything's clearly stated, and especially when you already have a section just describing about the character sheet, and only to find out that things there is a discrepancy between what is stated in your rules section and what is put into the pre-gen itself. I feel like there's just maybe there were just too many heads, or too many hands that were put into this, that was involved in this product, that really felt like the left hand was not talking to the right, and everything just was compiled together, barely had any much time to really do a thorough check, and then was just pushed out. Maybe that's I don't know, is that the quality that we are supposed to expect from a free RPG Day product? But I really expected a lot more from from a studio as established and as reputable as Green Ronin. These are just very minor technical issues that I wasn't expecting from someone who comes from who has vast experience in the industry as Green Ronin. Now, what are my thoughts overall? Despite my complaints, the good thing is my players did like the system, although they probably had a few things to say about the adventure. Some of them were partial towards the setting itself. Some like the expanse of the different planes, and would think that if we do get into the full version of Modern Age, that is definitely an area that they want to really explore more, and I thoroughly agree with them. And maybe once they are on board with the lore, especially explaining the Paradixion and the Sodality, I think that makes for an interesting base to start with, to explore the different worlds of the Modern Age setting. They are still interested in the stun system of the age system in general, and the good news is my next game is going to be another age system game. We are going to play in another setting, and we have pretty much decided that we are going to go ahead and give the age system another try with the Expanse RPG from the recent Expanse RPG from Green Ronin, with licensed by Green Ronin, and they also have a quick start in the Expanse RPG, and I'm actually sort of interested in seeing how the age system translates into a different setting, and in fact in a different genre entirely. So, and after the Expanse, we are actually looking into to finally do the Dragon Age system as well. So I guess the saving grace for this quick start is that it has piqued our interest into the age system, but not necessarily for the setting, for the Modern Age line in particular. So that's pretty much a win and lose situation, I would feel, for a quick start, which I had hoped it would have done a bit better, but I don't know. I feel like I've already pretty much given my only input, or what I really thought about this quick start, and I'm really sorry to be really really blunt about my thoughts on this, because. And it might have been a bit more forgivable if this was my first quick start. But the thing is, there are really some good quality quick starts that they are out there, and I think whoever is behind the Modern Age line should really maybe consider doing a revision of this quick start, because quick starts to me are always a valuable product, especially at what I'm looking for, at the stage of what I'm looking for from RPGs right now. And I would hope that designers would think that quick starts are not only just an introduction to their system, but it's also an important sales pitch. And you know what happens when you don't make a good sales pitch to someone who's interested in whatever you have to sell. So these are my thoughts for Modern Age Quick Start, for the Modern Age Quick Start Threefold. It might sound very it probably sounds very ranty that I've come to this point, but in any case, I think why I'm doing this is just to really really share my experience and this might not be the only quick start that I'll be reviewing. So I'm really looking forward to the expand quick start. I hope I will not be seeing many of the similarities that I didn't like in the expand as with the modern age one, but who knows, you know. So I guess that'll be all for me for tonight. You can definitely pick up the Modern Age Threefold Quickstart for free on Drive-Thru RPG. I'll probably leave the link down below. And let me know, and maybe you had a different experience with the quick start. I would definitely like to hear those, and hopefully prove to me that I was wrong in my interpretation or my expectations for the quick start. So I guess that'll be all. This is the Questing GM signing out for now, and I'll see you in the next quick starter video. Bye.